absolutely love talking about burnout. It's unfortunately what I see in clinic day in, day out. And as a functional GP, we always go to the root cause, and I always talk about stress. And I see so many patients go through burnout, and they unfortunately present with different physical symptoms. So it's a topic that I'm really, really passionate about. And it's a great time for all of us to take a moment and just to have a check in and just run through what we're doing for ourselves, especially as clinicians. How are we looking after ourselves? So we're going to talk about 7 key strategies, and they're really simple, but it can be so transformative. So I think the number one thing I'd love for you to do is just take a moment to actually just check in and go, how do you feel today? How are you feeling? And let's just do a proper check-in, because often we're in this automatic mode of these long to-do lists, lots of things to do. I bet you've got a really, really busy schedule and so many responsibilities. So when do we actually do our own check-in? And, instead of waiting for someone to ask you how you're doing, let's just check in how you're doing right now. So often when it comes to stress, and especially stress, we're facing a lot of challenges. And these are just a couple of examples, and I'm sure you can almost relate to many of them. And, we take on maybe different roles. Many of my patients have got this really long to-do list that they have got to get done every day. I hear about patients having 200 to 300 emails every day. We're constantly solving problems. And of course, stress often happens when we've got so many demands and less resources, and there's an imbalance there. So the lack of support, and of course, we all know this, we've all experienced it, just having that lack of time. So we're always feeling we're rushing to get to places, and lack of money, and when money plays a factor in stress. So can we actually get to a place where we're feeling joy? We're actually waking up in the morning, we're excited to get to do what we want to do, and we've got time and space to do it, and we're not rushing, we're not feeling overwhelmed. And can we actually get there? So this is what this webinar is all about. There's a couple of strategies that are so simple, that can be easily implemented, that can transform the way you feel. So what exactly is burnout? And there's a couple of definitions out there, and they often link it to workplace. But I have to say, burnout also happens at home. It could be carer's burnout. It could be maternal burnout that people don't really talk about. So we've always related it to workplace, but have a think about other areas in your life where you're under pressure. So over time, you're doing work, you're thriving, you're getting through it. But at some point, you feel tired, you're feeling exhausted, your energy is depleted. And then the kind of feeling towards work changes. It can be quite negative. You're not feeling that joy and excitement. Things don't excite you any longer. And this can actually affect how you perform. And to be honest, you can relate that to maternal burnout, you can relate it to carer's burnout. It's that constant, ongoing, on that treadmill that you never seem to stop. And at one point, your body and mind will actually tell you to stop. And that's when you're reaching burnout. And often people actually don't know they're in it. They're on their way to burnout, or they actually felt burnout. And I actually had a patient who's a psychologist, and it was a really interesting discussion that she suddenly realized she was going through burnout, because what she presented to it was lots of physical symptoms. And when we talked back to what her day was like, she didn't realize it, because we get into a habit, we get into a pattern of what is considered normal, but in actual fact, it's not serving us anymore. So it's a couple of check-in questions that you could feel. It's like, am I actually feeling the joy for work anymore? Am I feeling quite negative about it? And am I exhausted? I have another patient who was the executive assistant to CEO of a bank, and her burnout, when she finally decided to do something, when she said she couldn't walk to the end of her driveway, she was just so exhausted. So it can present in many ways, but the most important thing, it's a gradual journey towards burnout. So the first thing I'd love to do is actually talk about the stress reaction, because often we don't know what's actually happening in our body. going into the 7 key strategies, and lastly, having a couple of minutes for yourself to just check in and go, okay, what's my self-care plan? So, what exactly is the stress reaction? And it's a great recap for all of us because we live such automated lives and we just go on to do with what is familiar to us. And we may not be realizing what's actually happening inside our body when we're feeling overwhelmed, when we're feeling stressed. And this is a really good point to realize it starts with a thought. It's our perception of our reality, it's our perception of what's happening around us. And it could be from fear, guilt, embarrassment. It's an emotion. And this emotion triggers a series of reactions in our brain that results in a series of reactions in our body. So it starts with a thought. And that thought, the amygdala is a gland sitting in your brain that detects fear. And it's interesting, research is actually showing the amygdala sits wherever at a baseline level, and that baseline level is whatever is familiar to you. So that could be growing up with a lot of anxiety, growing up with a lot of stress, whether it's the household, whether it's parents, whether it's the environment. And your baseline could be actually sitting at low level anxiety. So it doesn't take much to trigger a fight or flight response. So what it does, it says, yes, this is a fearful situation. Get me out of here. So it sends signals to the hypothalamus, which then sends signals to the adrenal glands sitting on top of your kidneys to start secreting adrenaline, noradrenaline, and cortisol. And this is when the rest of the body hears the signals and starts giving you the symptoms of a fight or flight response, which you can describe as, which you may be familiar with, where maybe your heart's pounding or your heart's racing or you become a bit sweaty or that feeling of overwhelm. And it's signals that transmitted through hormones and through the nervous system, which we're going to go into, that sympathetic nervous system, that is actually designed for your survival to say, get me out of here. So it increases your heart rate. And as you are familiar with the Nova app, the gut is connected to the nervous system. And during times of stress, it's actually saying, no, it's not the right time to eat and digest. So decreased blood flow to the digestive system. And it's really designed for you to, great, cross that road and take action. Or how do I get out of this meeting? What do I do? I'm in an awful situation. So that's the nervous system. And this slide is just to remind us what we're designed for in a normal day. That cortisol rise in the morning to give clarity, to get us out of bed, to get us moving for the day. But more importantly for our survival, because it's designed to, right, we've got to get up, find food, everything that's needed for our survival. But in today's world, we can be having those spikes of cortisol throughout the day and even at night. And that's what I see in my patients. So yes, you can have that morning rise in cortisol, which is quite normal and healthy. But what happens throughout the rest of the day, keeping that fight or flight response going? So over time, what does that do? So we mentioned about that sympathetic, which you're familiar with. We know the gut's connected through the enteric nervous system. So interestingly, over time, and I'm talking about chronic stress. So yes, we're always going to get stresses, but do we carry that stress? Are we ruminating? Are we thinking about it the whole day and even the night? And it's that chronic stress over days, weeks, even years that lead to various symptoms. And interestingly, this is what patients present in the clinic. It's with these symptoms, and hardly ever do we link it to chronic stress. So insomnia, many patients will be affected by sleep, anxiety, chronic generalized anxiety, weight gain. How often do we talk about stress and weight? And we'll talk about the links in a bit. Thyroid health is affected by stress. And of course, as we know, irritable bowel syndrome. So I just put this slide up to it's a great reminder how one single thought of fear and stress is affecting so many different parts of the body. And that's the sympathetic nervous system. And it's just highlighted the opposite, which is the parasympathetic nervous system, which calms the body down. And that's what we're going to go into, the strategies which affect the parasympathetic, which promote it. And I often say we forgot about the amazing vagus nerve, which is the biggest nerve of the parasympathetic, how it makes a huge difference in the stress response. And we can activate it. We've got the power to activate the vagus nerve with simple strategies. So let's just go back. What challenges are you facing? And as a result, is that giving you chronic stress? Is that leading to burnout? And what do you actually need to overcome these challenges? It's energy, it's mental clarity, it's focus, it's concentration. So you can come up with solutions. Often when people are on this treadmill, there is no time to even think about solutions. There's lack of mental clarity, there's a lack of energy. And I often find patients saying, well, that's how it is. That's how it is. I just have to push through. I have to deal with my multiple roles, being the driver for the family, being the breadwinner for the family. I have to just push through. And there is no time to go back and say, can I actually find solutions for what I'm doing? And hence why the 7 key strategies are going to help you find clarity, focus, concentration, and energy. So let's talk with number 1, and it's something so simple. You can do it now, you can do it every single day, and often we don't, and it's how we breathe. So a quick exercise for you to do just right now is to place one hand on your chest and one hand on your tummy and take a deep breath in and just see which rises first. And I often do this with patients. And what I tend to find 9 times out of 10, if they're sitting in my clinic, they are breathing shallow. So they're using the chest wall rises first. And what we want is to breathe deeply. We want the tummy to rise first. So what I normally say is take a deep breath in and blow out your tummy like a kid, like how babies breathe. We've actually taught ourselves to chest breathe. Being in the chronic stress reaction, we've taught ourselves to chest breathe. And we need to go back to tummy breathing. And you will be surprised the number of patients who are still chest breathing. And what does that actually mean? It means you're keeping yourself in that fight or flight response. You're using only half of your lungs, and a simple deep breath will activate the vagus nerve, the parasympathetic. So what I say is many patients go, right, I meditate in the morning, I meditate in the evening, I might do a yoga class. But I go, what's happening throughout the day when you're checking your emails, when you're about to enter a meeting? Often we're chest breathing, we're going into the fight or flight response. To take some lovely deep breaths, check in throughout the day, and even, have some reminders. Maybe it's every half an hour, have a reminder to go, let's just take a deep breath. And it's phenomenal. A few deep breaths make you feel so different. So it's such a simple strategy, and it's so powerful to activate the vagus nerve. So the next one, which is probably, again, so important, and I say this a lot to my patients, it's the easiest to give up and the hardest to take back. So just to give you an idea, there was a study done in the States, in fact, close to 50% of the population is sleep deprived. And what does that mean? That means then less than 6 hours of sleep is what people are getting. And that is equivalent to being drunk on the road. So that's the equivalent of being what the level of focus and concentration you have. And often people just stop and think and go, wow, I've actually been sleep deprived for years. And it's quite phenomenal when you dive into someone's sleep history. They haven't been sleeping deeply, finding it hard to get to bed, staying asleep, and waking up tired for years. So what is that actually doing to our body? And how is that affecting the way we think, the way we problem solve, the way we address stress? So a really quick test to do for yourself, a really quick questionnaire to do for yourself to just check in. How are you sleeping? What's your quality of your sleep like? And this is a stated questionnaire, and it's evidence-based, and it's quite easy to do with yourself and your patients. And obviously, the higher the score, the better the sleep quality. And of course, sleep changes over time. So you might be going through a stressful period, your sleep will change, but it's really good to do a check-in. And the question I really love there is, are you asleep between 2 and 4 in the morning? And I often ask patients this, and it's because many are not. You're waking up around that time, and it's a good time to sort of think, why are we doing this? And that's because of a cortisol spike. It's because of your adrenals. You're going through that stress response. Often, I have many young patients who say, I wake up to go to the toilet multiple times at night. Again, that's not normal. We really need to address it. How do we get really, really good deep sleep? And that just goes right down to sleep hygiene. So a few checks on sleep hygiene, which are really quick. So obviously the number one is screen time. And I always have an interesting conversation with patients when we talk about screen time, because many are addicted to their phones. They've got the phones right beside them, by their bedside. Unfortunately, when they do wake up at night, they even check their phones. So let's just talk about that. What exactly is that doing to us? So phones, that light tells the sensor in our brain that it's daylight. So it's spiking cortisol, and it looks so innocent. And I say this often, it looks so innocent. We're watching TV or we're watching something on our screens and we're going straight to bed. That is actually telling our mind that it's daylight and it's spiking cortisol. So it's not allowing the body to rest and not allowing to create this beautiful sleep ritual, and it's almost keeping you alert before going to bed. So your quality is not that great. And I often say, just experiment what half an hour without screen time looks like, 1 hour before bed without screen time looks like, and create a beautiful sleep ritual. And its sleep ritual may look like we're listening to something, where it's music, or it's a bit of a meditation, or it's a nice hot bath, it's a hot shower. You can create such a beautiful sleep ritual which doesn't involve screens, and just see how you feel. So all of these strategies, it's not something that you have to do, but just experiment and just see how you feel, because when you get that positive feedback and feel amazing, you want to do more of it. The next thing is meditation. You may all be familiar with it. However, meditation, there's so many studies, over 6,000 studies now, and it does change the structures in your brain. It reduces the size of the amygdala. It changes our response to stress. And just 12 weeks of mindfulness-based meditation can have a dramatic effect on mental health. And the last thing I often say, and many are not aware, is the impact of Wi-Fi on your pineal gland and the impact of your sleep. So there's so many layers to stress that can improve the quality. So the next thing is movement. Keep it really simple. Breathe, sleep, and now move. When you really think about it, when we're looking at a lot of people who are having desk-based roles, how often do we move? And especially, in the last couple of years during the COVID crisis, we were very sedentary. And I caught myself, because I was doing a lot of telehealth, I caught myself sitting for 3 to 4 hours and not moving. I couldn't believe it. It was making me feel awful, sluggish. It affected my mood. How often do we move? And it's a good time to do a bit of a check-in. And you can create a lifestyle where you're moving more. So even for desk-based workers, how about having walk and talk meetings? How about going to the water cooler many times in the day, making sure you're hydrating? Any excuse to have a break from your desk. And so now in my room, I just make sure my printers, somewhere I have to actually go and walk, get some forms. I'm walking to meet my patients. I'm walking even in my consult room, and it's making me feel so different. But what exactly is the research saying about exercise? And when I looked at it, it was just so amazing. It only takes 5 minutes to improve your serotonin levels. It only takes 5 minutes of any kind of movement to make you smile. And that's what I say to patients is, choose movement for mental health, not really for weight. That's a totally different ball game. You've got to move for mental health. And the studies have shown 16 weeks of regular exercise is just as effective as an antidepressant. And I often say, let's not forget the beauty of nature, just going out there, getting some sun, being with nature. And studies have actually shown just 15 minutes in nature transforms how you feel. It doesn't take long. And when you look at the numbers, can you fit that into your day? So in your day, can you just pop out and get some sunlight? Can you pop out and sit by a tree? And it doesn't take long. And there's so much evidence to say it supports mental health. So the next one I'm moving to, and I'm smiling, is all about sugar. It is phenomenal what sugar does to your body. It's inflammatory, it affects mental health. It is quite phenomenal at what it does to your gut health as well. And we know 80% or 90% of serotonin is produced in your gut. So sugar does affect your health. So it's a great time to check in and go, how much sugar am I actually taking in a day? Because it all adds up. So recommended is about 6 teaspoons. So what does that actually look like? 1 teaspoon is 4 grams of sugar. So every time you pick something up that's processed, have a look at the packet. And they often say, 20 grams of sugar in 20 grams of carbs or sugar in 1 serving. What does that look like? That's equivalent to at least 5 teaspoons of sugar. And when we calculate it and represent it as teaspoons of sugar, you suddenly realize, wow, every little bit counts. So currently Australians are consuming 26 teaspoons of sugar, and hence why we're seeing so much of chronic disease, but we're also seeing a lot of mental illness as well. So it's just a great reminder about sugar. A couple of things which you may not heard of is sugar is addictive. It's 8 times more addictive than cocaine. And let's just take a moment there. It is so addictive. So I have conversations with my patients when we're looking at diet and we go through a journey together. And what I hear is, don't take away my cheat days. Please don't take away that. I love it. And that's a sign of addiction. That means the mind needs to be rewired when it comes to being addictive to sugar. Artificial sweetness increases the risk of diabetes. It gives the wrong message to the brain. So sometimes people go on to that pathway. It's not that great. It's just as bad. And when you really think about what you're shopping in a supermarket, have a look at what you're eating. 80% of the food in the supermarket contains sugar, and sugar affects the brain. So there has to be a why when people look at diet. And I often say, try it, experiment, see how it goes. And there's a way of reducing sugar, way of coming out of addictive habit, which I'm going to go into. And it's actually all to do with protein and fats and how you're eating. But before I do go into that, I think it's really important to mention alcohol. Again, when we're stressed, under a lot of pressure, and I see it as a habit that's developed in many of my patients where, highly functioning under a lot of pressure, they've turned to alcohol to de-stress. And over time, it becomes a habit. Maybe it's 1 or 2 glasses a week. It comes to daily, and it may slightly increase. And what happens is you might be surrounded by a tribe that drink more as well. And we normalize it. We normalize the quantity of alcohol we drink by surrounding yourself with people who do drink. And it becomes so normal to have. I was speaking to another patient, and it was really interesting because she moved away from being a lawyer. She went through burnout, and now she's a coach in coaching in relation to alcohol addiction. So she went through that period, and she goes, I moved away from work, but then I went into motherhood, and I was socializing with mums who would go off after dropping the kids and have glasses of wine. And it just normalized. So our behavior can be very much influenced by our tribe, but also we may have normalized it and not realized, what is the impact of alcohol? Am I drinking more than I need to? Alcohol affects sleep. Alcohol triggers anxiety the next day, and it also shrinks the brain. It is a toxin. And I have to say it, yes, it may make you feel good at that time, but it has effects the day after. It definitely affects your sleep, and it can be contributing to your stress. So the next thing I want to go into is something that many may not be aware of, and it's the power of magnesium. So why is magnesium so important? It's one of those minerals that is needed for over 600 chemical reactions. And guess what? We lose it during times of stress and we enter a cycle. So the cycle is when we're under stress, we lose magnesium and it makes us more prone to stress. We're kept in that cycle. Magnesium's needed a massive, most important player in our serotonin pathway. It's needed for gut health. It's needed for detox pathways. It's needed to in our hormones. It's needed for insulin to function, to push sugar into the cells. So it just kind of gives you an idea the importance of magnesium. And why do we talk about it? Because we lose it. We lose it stress, sugar, alcohol, processed foods. We don't really have enough magnesium in our soils either. So that's a great one to start with. How do we supplement with magnesium? How do we increase it? And magnesium is incredibly calming. It's supporting all our calming neurotransmitters. It's supporting our sleep pathways as well. And the type of magnesium is important and how you take it. So orotates, glycinates, threonates. Threonates are known to cross the blood-brain barrier. Glycinates are so kind to the gut. So often people stop the magnesium because it's affecting the gut. So it's worth going into glycinate, having a look at threonate, and finding a magnesium that you tolerate well. And it is amazing, amazing for sleep, amazing for energy, amazing for mood as well. So the last thing I want to go into, which is really, really important, it's a very quick overview of nutrition and how that can transform how you feel. So we mentioned about the sugar cravings. When we're stressed, we turn to carbs. It gives us a bit of a hit. We're looking for energy. The mind's looking for glucose. What we need to really do is revamp our food plate. And actually, first question to ask ourselves is, where is my protein? Where am I getting my protein from? And I more often than not, see many people undereat protein. So we need 1 to 1.5 grams per kilo per day. And just to give you an idea, the best sources are animal sources, and it's meat, fish, chicken. Just an example. So 100 grams of meat, fish, and chicken is only 25 grams of carbs. 25 grams of protein. So example, you weigh 60 kilos, you need 60 to 90 grams of protein per day, which is equivalent. So I always times by 4, 240 to 320 of meat, chicken, fish a day. Make it even simpler. Think about 100 grams of protein, the quantity of protein and weight for every meal. And just to give you an idea, 1 egg is only 6 grams of protein. So even bumping up your protein, now good quality, whole food protein makes you feel so different. And why is that? It's amino acids. Every part of the body is reliant on amino acids. Our serotonin comes from tryptophan, which is an amino acid. We are really not eating enough protein. And protein, amino acids, not only are the building blocks, but when we're filling our stomach with protein, we're sending signals to the brain of feeling full. When we're filling our stomach with protein and fat, we're actually downplaying that sugar pathway. And it's an amazing way of completely curbing our sugar cravings. And sometimes when people talk about vegetarian diets, I think it's really important to know that lentils and chickpeas are high in carbs compared to protein. So that can be a bit of quite misleading when we're looking at vegetarian diets, and how vegetarian diets may not give you the amount of protein that you're looking for. And unfortunately, people are having to supplement with protein shakes to reach that kind of protein content. The other thing we're going to look into is fats. Just a quick reminder, the seed oils, we've got to avoid those seed oils. It's inflammatory. It causes mitochondrial dysfunction as well. Let's go back to what we're used to, what we've probably, parents and grandparents used to eat: butter, olive oil, lard, tallow, ghee, such great healthy fats to cook with. And then lastly, you look at your carbs. And remember, carbs are anything that breaks down into glucose or fructose. So grains and fruits are in that category. And let's not forget the reminder to drink water. That's something I'm going to raise my hand and say, I go through periods where I go, wow, I'm not drinking. I'm even a bit lazy about that. Let's just bump up that water content as well. So just a quick recap. 7 really easy, simple, but such effective strategies, and it will transform how you feel. And I think on that burnout journey, we get caught up in automation. We get caught up that we don't have time to think and sit and go, what can I do differently? And we need that space, we need that energy, we need that mental clarity to be able to think our way out of problems. And that's why these simple strategies are just key for just great well-being. Amazing. Thank you, Claire. Just a few extras. I'm just going to remind people that the vagus nerve, it's not only the breathing, but laughter. How often, do we laugh? The yoga, the meditation, the singing, all stimulate the vagus nerve. And as a result, what kind of strategies can you do to in a week, every day, that calms the nervous system down, that you're always doing a check-in, whether it's, I know my top 3 is starting the day with meditation, journaling. I love my walks in nature, and I love my music, and that I know these are the key strategies that I go to on a daily basis to calm the nervous system, to get me ready for the day. So it's worth just checking in and finding just 2 to 3 strategies. Thank you, Claire.
Awesome. Thank you so much. That was awesome. I have a couple questions. If you don't mind, we'll go through a little Q&A. First question is, how can physicians advocate for their own well-being and raise awareness about the importance of addressing burnout within the medical community?
Absolutely. I think it's poorly done. I think you get caught up because you're caregivers. At the end of the day, you're thinking about other people, and it's a long day. You're constantly problem solving. And they even talk about decision fatigue at the end of the day. So we actually have to be our own patient here. We have to be our own advocate. We've actually got to check in and ask ourselves on a daily basis of, how am I feeling? What am I, am I feeling fatigued? If I actually checked in with another practitioner to perhaps get my bloods done, to actually have a mental health check-in, I think it's really important that you do have another practitioner that you can go to look after you, because you can't look after yourself, and it's hard to be objective. So having another practitioner check in as well, making sure you do daily check-ins, weekly check-ins, to say, are you enjoying it? Am I exhausted? Am I not enjoying what I'm doing now? So what can I do to do differently? And literally go through that 7-step checklist of breathing, sleep, movement, keeping it really, really simple. And I think sleep is a really important one for practitioners. I think they might be working late. I know many female practitioners who check in after, go online after their kids have gone to sleep, and they work late. And it's very easy to give up sleep, but it's the hardest to take back. And it's just phenomenal for what it does for your health. So it's having your own checking, having your own plan, self-care plan.
That's great. Question about sort of the training of healthcare providers. Do you have any suggestions on how training programs, whether it be medical schools or residency programs, better prepare physicians, or just beyond physicians in all sectors of healthcare, how training programs better prepare healthcare providers so that they can cope with stress of physician burnout?
Absolutely. So in my own experience, it wasn't taught at med school. So I had to seek it, and it was through, colleagues introducing me to organizations like Australian College of Nutrition and Environmental Medicine. But I know there's the lifestyle medicine, there's one in the States, there's one in Australia. All of these are popping up. There's also a Society of Metabolic Health Practitioners that's popped up in the States, and we've got one in Australia. So there's actually lots of organizations. Unfortunately, it takes initiative. It hasn't been mandatory in med schools yet, and I think it may be changing, but there's not much emphasis on it. So it's something that the clinician has to take ownership of and seek, whether it's training through these organizations, or there's actually so many sort of webinars and podcasts. And I know many people know about Andrew Uberman and so many, Mark Hyman, Rangan Chatterjee. How you learn, it depends on how you learn, whether it's a simple podcast or you go through training for it.
Awesome. Last question. Do you know of any emerging trends or anything sort of on the forefront of the healthcare industry right now that is aimed at reducing physician burnout that you're finding promising?
I've heard that there's so many courses around, and even the physicians' organizations are aware of it. So whether they're sending out webinars, they're actually doing retreats, they're bringing mindfulness into whether it's GP training or even med school training. But however, it's really scarce. It's happening, but I actually say the ownership is on you to take initiative to actually do something about it, because no one's going to look after you apart from you. And whether it is going, right, I'm going to find a great practitioner to look after me, or I'm actually going to do something about my own health and take initiative. Yeah.
Awesome. And I think, having practitioners like yourself speaking on this topic and the fact that we had so much interest in listening to this topic, I think that is very promising in itself. But I really appreciate your time today. This was excellent, and thank you everyone for bearing with us at the technical difficulties at the beginning. I made the comment in the chat that we definitely used our stress management tools while troubleshooting, but certainly we were equipped to do so, and like I said, appreciate everyone for bearing with us through that. I just want to call out your podcast one more time. It is really an excellent podcast. It's called the Six Hats Podcast. And it is, gives us those tools on how stress impacts our health and what we can do about it. So if you want to hear more from Dr. Shami, I would certainly point you in that direction. And like I said, thank you so much. This has been wonderful. And I hope you have an awesome day.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Enjoy.